At the moment when I stood on the stage, bathed in light and attention, microphone in hand, everything felt both familiar and alien at the same time. My mother, as always, sought to be the center of attention. Her voice echoed through my words, taking everything that was supposed to be mine. I was the daughter of great names, but that day I decided to say what I hadn't been able to for years. Fury, mixed with resentment, boiled in my chest, while cold determination showed on my face. But the most terrifying thing wasn't that I took the spotlight from her, it was the sudden realization that, without her pride, which had rejected me, I wouldn't have become who I was that day. And in that moment, when everything I knew crumbled, I made a decision that might destroy everything. But isn't it in destruction that we find true freedom? I am Anna, the last thought in a family of geniuses. My birth turned out to be a kind of mistake, a random glitch in the perfect scheme my parents had so meticulously built. They were the elite of the academic world, stars of the university whose names resonated in the highest circles of scientific and cultural communities. Their lives had been planned down to the smallest detail. But I came without warning, without an invitation, and perhaps that's why I became something superfluous, something secondary in our family. Mother often said, with a voice roughened by regret, that she realized too late that my sister Sarah and I, born just 11 months apart, weren't just siblings but opposites. We did look like twins, but that was the only thing we shared. Sarah was intellect, and I was heart. Sarah, as the older, more polished example of perfection, was always the first in everything, always several steps ahead of me, and no one noticed it but me. From early childhood, it was clear who the favorite was. "Look, John, Sarah is already reading," Mom exclaimed when I was barely 3 years old. Sarah sat in the corner devouring complex books meant for children much older than her. I sat nearby, staring blankly at the pages, trying to understand what those letters were all about. Sarah was always the source of pride, and I was the source of regret. I couldn't remember even simple words, while she was already reading texts I couldn't dream of. I felt helpless, unable to meet such high standards. And it was palpable everywhere. Anna, how many times do I have to explain this? It's just addition. Mom once said, her voice edged with irritation. Sitting at the table with a math textbook, I couldn't understand why the numbers on the page danced and mocked me. I tried my best to concentrate, but they remained abstract, incomprehensible. I could say I've always been unlucky with math, but at that moment, I just wanted to disappear. Sarah, with her mathematical genius, worked on her problems in the next room, oblivious to my failures. What I lacked in academics, however, I made up for in life. I was a bright, cheerful, perhaps even slightly wild child. I became the soul of any gathering, always knowing how to make people laugh, how to lift the mood. My presence in a room was immediately felt, laughter was both my friend and weapon. But despite my charisma, my parents didn't share my approach to life. My antics increasingly irritated them. One family dinner, I told a joke I'd heard at school, and that was when Mom interrupted me. "Stop laughing for no reason," she said sharply. "It's a sign of low intelligence. Please control yourself." I fell silent, my cheeks flushing with embarrassment. I felt bitterness and shame filling me. Sarah's threatening silence was even more palpable. She sat engrossed in her quantum physics book, her face serene, her gaze fixed on the text, radiating focus and superiority. Our differences became increasingly evident, and the gap between my sister and me only deepened. Sarah continued collecting accolades, praise from teachers, gold medals, diplomas. For me, happiness was sometimes just getting a gold star for good attendance. I remember the day of the school science fair in 5th grade. Sarah's project on cellular mitosis won first place, while I participated with an experiment using baking soda. The result was far from perfect. On the way home, the car was filled with praise for Sarah. I sat in the back seat, covered in dry baking soda, feeling smaller and smaller. Dad glanced at me in the rearview mirror and said, "Not everyone in the family can be a scientist." Mom nodded without looking up. "Obviously, Anna lacks the aptitude. What will our colleagues think?" I felt the world shrink around me. I was a disappointment, the weak link, the one who couldn't carry on their legacy in science. As we grew older, the divide only widened. Sarah attended science camps, math conferences, everywhere she could hone her extraordinary talents. I stayed home with our elderly nanny, Mrs. Rinaldi, who turned out to be a true blessing for me. While my parents prepared Sarah to be the next great scientist, I found solace elsewhere. Mrs. Rinaldi taught me skills that seemed unheard of in my parents' house. "Come on, Anna, let's do it," she'd say, gently guiding my hands through the dough we kneaded in an old, cracked bowl. Sometimes her wrinkled fingers would brush against mine, as if trying to pass on something important, something secret that schools didn't teach. She taught me how to bake a pie that would amaze everyone, not just with culinary skills but with the kindness emanating from her hands. "The key here is not to rush, Anna. Life's least worth rushing," she'd say as we clicked coupons or planned shopping lists. "Listen to me, girl," she'd add, smiling with her tired, slightly drooping eyes. "The ability to stretch a dollar is as important as splitting an atom. Because what good are smarts if you can't survive in this world?" Those words, like stones, settled deeply in my soul. It took me a while to realize their importance, but over time, they became my sturdy pillars. Sarah continued to shine. She participated in every science competition, bringing home medals, trophies, and diplomas that my mother proudly displayed in the living room like trophies of her own victories. For Sarah, the world was a maze where she effortlessly found her way to success. Meanwhile, my report cards were hidden away in a desk drawer, out of sight. All those medals, the gleam in my parents' eyes, they always bypassed me. There was nothing I could do. School was a struggle for me, but for Sarah, it was easy. Day by day, I realized that I was different. I couldn't understand why math was my enemy, why all those numbers and formulas seemed to mock me intentionally. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't grasp the language that everyone else seemed to love. But if I couldn't be as smart as she was, I could at least try to embody life itself. Yet even that wasn't enough. When the SAT results came, it was the final blow. Sarah scored brilliantly, while my results, well, let's just say they were far from impressive. I knew they wouldn't get me into any university. That day, as I stood there, my father waved my score report and shouted louder than ever before, "You can't even do 2 plus 2. How do you plan to get into college? What do you even want out of life? Where are your ambitions?" My mother stood next to him, shaking her head in disgust, silent. Sarah, leaning smugly against the doorframe, didn't even try to support me or offer a single word of comfort. That was the moment I realized that to them, I would always be the one who failed to meet expectations. But amidst their shouting and reproach, I felt something else. Anger. Determination. A burning desire to prove to everyone that I was worth something too. That night, their words still ringing in my ears, I made a decision. Not college. But that didn't mean I couldn't achieve something. The morning after graduation, I walked into Sunny's supermarket and got a job as a cashier. It was far from what I had imagined for myself, but at least now I had something of my own, a life that felt like it was rising from the bottom. When I told my parents about it, they barely looked up from their papers. They didn't ask how I was doing or what my job entailed. But I didn't care. It was my choice, and I was proud of it. Soon, I started earning my own money. It wasn't much, but it was enough to enjoy small pleasures and not ask my parents for anything. I wasn't fully independent yet, but I felt like I was starting to take control of my life. When Lisa, my co-worker at the store, called and invited me to go to the beach that weekend, I smiled and said yes. For the first time, I could say yes without worrying about the cost. While Sarah prepared for the academic year, buried in books and building her future career, I was finally beginning to feel free. I spent weekends at the beach, watched movies with friends, went on impromptu trips, and relished the freedom. In those moments, with the sound of waves mixing with voices and laughter, I finally felt alive. Being myself became possible, despite everything I had left behind. Weeks turned into months, and I began to settle into my new life. I started to see it as something real and tangible, no longer dreaming of becoming someone else. Of course, it wasn't the life my parents had envisioned. Their perfect world was far removed from my reality. But in my reality, I was happy. I felt this life was mine, and I controlled every moment of it. I allowed myself to be independent, to follow no one else's rules or expectations. And then the day came that changed everything. It was an ordinary Tuesday, midday, and the store was as quiet as ever. I was standing at the register, restocking packs of gum, when I heard the soft whoosh of the automatic door opening. Looking up, I froze. My mother. I hadn't expected to see her there, and she certainly hadn't expected to see me. We stared at each other, and I immediately saw the shock in her eyes, quickly replaced by embarrassment. A moment of silence hung between us. She took a step back, clearly intending to leave without a word, but some part of me, naive and still hopeful, made me call out to her, "Mom, hey." She turned slowly, her face instantly hardening into a mask of disdain. "Anna," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment so deep that I felt it in my chest. "What are you doing here?" I pointed to my name badge with the supermarket logo and tried to speak as calmly as possible, striving to appear casual. "I've been working here for a few months." Her eyes narrowed, and I saw the disgust in her gaze transform into mockery. "Anna, the cashier, daughter of a professor, reduced to this," she said, emphasizing each word. She gestured toward the store, surrounded by shelves of products, as if it were the worst place in the world. "What will our colleagues think when they find out my daughter is at the bottom rung of the social ladder?" Her words struck me like a blow to the heart. I, who had taken pride in my independence, in earning my own way and breaking free from their control, felt that pride crumble in an instant. In her eyes, I was nothing, and my efforts were meaningless and futile. I tried to say something in my defense, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'm working honestly. I've managed. I'm earning for myself. My boy is still little. I'm not doing anything wrong." But her reaction was so fierce that I could barely get the words out. Her voice rose, drawing the attention of the few people in the store. There were so few customers that her shouting echoed throughout the space. "You will quit this job immediately. Do you hear me? You are a disgrace to this family. If this is the path you've chosen, you can forget about living under our roof." I stood there, frozen. Everything inside me tightened. She turned abruptly and ran out of the store without another word. The automatic door closed behind her with such a loud sound that, in that moment, the entire atmosphere of the store became deafeningly silent. That night, I returned home with a heavy heart, feeling the burn of tears on my cheeks, tears I couldn't hold back. The house was quiet, but it was an oppressive silence. It felt as though all that was left was to wait and see what would happen next. Without saying a word, I went to my room and began packing my things. I was fastening the last suitcase when my mother appeared in the doorway. Her face showed neither worry nor regret. On the contrary, it was a look of relief. "So, you've finally decided to leave," she said, her voice calm and emotionless. "Good. It's for the best." And suddenly, as if out of nowhere, my father appeared. He nodded in agreement and added, in an utterly even tone, "Don't forget to change your last name. We can't have you disgracing our name with your choices." I felt each of their words hit me like a blow, but there was no room left inside me for tears. I was beyond that. I couldn't listen to them or process their words any longer. They had turned this house into a place where I no longer belonged. "That's fine," I said, surprisingly calmly. "I'll take Grandpa's name." At least he knew how to love unconditionally. I grabbed my bags and left the house without looking back. They didn't ask for my new address, and I didn't offer it. The next day, when I moved in with Lisa, I felt like everything was finally becoming mine. Over the past few months, Lisa had become more than just a friend. She was like family, someone in whose company I truly felt at home. We spent a lot of time together, and on one lazy Sunday, when I told her about my encounter with my mother, she didn't hesitate for a second. Despite her usual practicality, Lisa offered me her spare room. Her offer felt like salvation. I accepted it gratefully, without a second thought, because in her home, I felt the kind of support and understanding I had only dreamed of. A few days later, Lisa and I were sitting on the couch, scrolling through social media as usual. I was rapidly flipping through my feed when I suddenly came across Sarah's profile. My finger hovered over the unfollow button, but curiosity got the better of me. I continued scrolling through her posts. It was a parade of achievements, photos of her awards, updates about her latest scientific accomplishments, announcements about her joining elite academic societies. Each post was flooded with likes and comments full of admiration and genuine awe for her talent. "Your sister?" Lisa asked, peering over my shoulder. I shook my head, memories of Sarah stabbing me sharply, like the point of a knife. The last time I spoke to Sarah was a few weeks after I left home. It was a moment of weakness when, despite everything, I decided to call her. We met at a cafe, and the conversation was full of strained politeness. She responded coldly, her words like ice. "Anna, I'm afraid we no longer have anything in common. Our interests and, frankly, our levels of development are completely different. I think continuing to meet would be unproductive for both of us." That was the last conversation we had, and since then, she had shown no interest in me. Although I no longer maintained close ties with my immediate family, and my life seemed far removed from the world they had envisioned for me, I still kept in touch with extended relatives. Aunt Martha, for instance, was someone I could turn to for comfort and support. During one of our usual conversations, she shared information that not only hurt but also solidified my resolve. "Oh, Anna," she sighed, her voice heavy with sadness, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but your parents. They always ask if you'll be at family gatherings, and if we say yes, they refuse to come. They say you're beneath them now and can't be in the same room." It felt like 1,000 tiny needles piercing me. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but it was strangely distant and dull. "It's okay now, Aunt Martha," I said, surprised at how calmly I could say it. I was happy. My life was my choice, and if my parents couldn't understand that, it was their loss. I didn't need their approval to be confident that I was on the right path. I had a job, friends who accepted me unconditionally, and an inner sense of self-worth that didn't depend on academic titles or social status. 5 years had passed since I left my parents' house. Life had settled into a steady rhythm. I had been promoted to assistant manager at the store, my circle of friends had grown significantly, and I had started taking online courses in business management. But there was still an emptiness inside me that kept me from feeling completely fulfilled. Something was missing. And that feeling came to the forefront one sweltering summer evening, when my friends organized a bonfire on the beach. That's when I noticed him. He stood a little apart from the group, seeming out of place. In a button-down shirt and khaki pants, he looked a bit unusual among the others. But his eyes caught my attention. They sparkled with curiosity as he took in the scene around him. I walked up to him and extended my hand. "Hi, I'm Anna." "You look like you could use a little fun," I said, trying to break the ice. He laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that made me smile in return. "I'm David," he said. And yes, I could definitely use some fun. That's how we met. We talked while roasting marshmallows, sharing stories about our travels and our lives. It turned out that David was an environmental scientist who had recently returned from a research expedition in the Amazon. We talked for hours, discussing everything and nothing. But there was something genuine in his eyes, something real, and I felt like this encounter was part of something important, something I had been searching for a long time. David was captivated by my stories about working in customer service, and I, in turn, was enchanted by his passion for the environment. Our conversations grew deeper, and our feelings stronger. He listened to me with genuine interest, and I loved how he valued me not for degrees or accolades, but for the unique perspective I brought to every discussion. He often said I had a rare gift, the ability to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. Weeks turned into months, and we grew closer. I discovered new horizons through David's world of environmental research, while he taught me to appreciate nature, its fragility, and its importance. Meeting his family was a pivotal moment. At a formal dinner 6 months into our relationship, I felt completely out of place. They were all accomplished scientists, successful in their fields. I was just a simple girl from a store, with empty pockets and a less-than-ideal past. But to my surprise, his family welcomed me with warmth and kindness. They didn't ask about my education or family background. Instead, they wanted to know about my dreams, what inspired me. It felt like a breath of fresh air in a stifling room. A year after we met, David proposed. It happened in the simplest way, without grand gestures or adornments. We stood together on the beach where we'd first started talking. He looked at me, and when I felt it was the right moment, I said yes. We planned a small wedding, inviting only our closest friends and family. But when it came time to finalize the guest list, I hesitated, torn over 3 names: Mom, Dad, and Sarah. Despite knowing those relationships wouldn't be mended, there was still an inexplicable hope inside me. Yet when the RSVPs came back, those 3 remained silent, and I realized I couldn't change their decision. Life with David was everything I had ever dreamed of: calm, harmonious, filled with love and support. We settled into a cozy routine, balancing his scientific work and my job at the store. But no matter how content I was, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was destined for something more, that something greater lay ahead. That feeling came to me on a lazy Sunday, as David, his family, and I relaxed in their backyard. We were enjoying the warm sun and cold lemonade when the conversation turned to David's latest research. He was stunned by the amount of plastic waste produced annually. Running a hand through his hair, he said, "It's horrifying. And the worst part is that most of it ends up in landfills or the ocean." His father nodded, his face serious, and added, "It's a crisis, no doubt. But what can we do about it? People aren't going to stop using plastic overnight." As they continued discussing the problem, an idea began forming in my mind. Years of working in retail had taught me a lot about people, about what they truly wanted. And all those hours spent with Mrs. Rinaldi, learning to be resourceful and creative, suddenly came back to me. I felt something long dormant stir within me. Before I knew what I was doing, I grabbed a napkin and a pen from the table. "What if," I began, my voice trembling with excitement. "What if we could turn plastic waste into something useful? Something people would actually want?" 3 pairs of eyes turned to me with curiosity, and, encouraged, I began sketching quickly on the napkin. The lines became clear and confident. "Outdoor furniture made entirely from recycled plastic," I said, holding up my rough but comprehensible drawing. "It would be durable, weather-resistant, and eco-friendly. We could make it modular, so people could customize their own designs." The silence that followed was almost deafening. I feared I had overstepped, that they would laugh at my idea. But then David's father slowly said, his eyes wide with amazement, "That's brilliant." David looked at me as though he was seeing me for the first time. "Do you know how many environmental problems this could address, and the enormous market potential? In that moment, something shifted in the air. I felt as though I had taken the first step towards something great, and a confidence I hadn't felt in years awoke within me. David's mother chimed in, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, and it doesn't have to stop at outdoor furniture. Think of all the urban applications. Park benches, playground equipment, even building materials. What followed was a whirlwind of energy. David's parents were excited, and their enthusiasm was contagious. They immediately began discussing how to secure funding, and before I knew it, we were planning to start a company. Yes, a company, with which I, Anna Holloway, a former cashier with empty pockets, was about to tie my destiny. David took charge of the scientific side, developing the technology for efficient plastic recycling, while I focused on design and marketing, drawing on my years of experience in customer service. I felt this was exactly the moment I had been searching for. Inspired by the chance to be part of something bigger, I threw myself into the work. We labored day and night, navigating ups and downs, but 6 months after that fateful Sunday in David's parents' backyard, we launched our first line of outdoor furniture. The response was overwhelming. Our company, DR Renew, quickly became a name recognized by those seeking eco-friendly solutions to plastic waste. We created not just products but a concept that captured people's imaginations. Customers loved our story. They felt that buying our furniture wasn't just a purchase, it was an investment in the planet's future. Buoyed by our success, we expanded our offerings, and soon urban planners began approaching us with interest. Their proposal to use our recycled plastic products for city projects marked a significant milestone. And then, one day, a call came that changed everything. The City Hall wanted to meet with us. We signed a contract to renovate the city, marking the beginning of a new chapter. Over the next 3 years, our company grew and thrived, recycling tons of plastic waste, transforming urban parks, and even starting production of eco-friendly building materials. By then, we had gained recognition, and our innovations were widely discussed in both scientific and business circles. We received numerous awards, but the greatest honor was the National Prize for Innovation and Environmental Impact. David and I stood in the grand ballroom, surrounded by the elite of the scientific and business worlds. We made our way through the crowd, stopping to chat with dignitaries and fellow innovators. At one point, I saw them, my parents and Sarah. They were standing near the refreshment table, and I immediately noticed how much they had changed. My mother and father looked significantly older, their hair streaked with gray, and Sarah appeared composed but visibly tired, with dark circles under her eyes betraying her stress. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw the shock on their faces. They clearly hadn't expected to see me there. I turned to David, taking his hand. "Go find your parents," I said, perhaps a little louder than necessary. We walked past my family, my chin held high, unwilling to let them see any emotion. We approached David's parents, who stood by the stage, beaming with pride. But as I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, I realized my mother was approaching. I tensed, bracing myself for an awkward interaction, but her words stunned me. "Excuse me," I heard her voice, syrupy sweet to my ears, "your family is so wonderful. You must be so proud of your son and his wife." I couldn't believe she had the audacity to approach and speak to my mother-in-law. Yet, to my surprise, my mother-in-law smiled warmly and replied, "Oh, we are. Anna is an incredible woman. We're lucky to have her in our family." It was a rare compliment, and its sincerity took me aback. When my mother returned to my father and Sarah, I noticed how they huddled together as if seeking protection. I barely caught their whisper, but its meaning was clear. "Can you believe it's her? She must be here as his +1. A tight knot formed in my chest, but I couldn't let their words affect me. At that moment, the host on stage announced my name. Recipient of the National Award for Innovation in Environmental Conservation, boomed through the speakers. My heart began to race with excitement as I stepped forward. As I approached the microphone, My hands trembled slightly, but I was ready to deliver the carefully prepared speech that reflected the journey I had traveled and the change David and I had brought to the world. Chaos erupted before I could speak. My mother rushed onto the stage, grabbing the microphone from my hands. Her voice, quivering with emotion, broke through the silence of the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," she proclaimed, her face glowing with a pride that felt foreign to me. "I am the proud mother of this brilliant, accomplished woman." In slow motion, she made a theatrical gesture meant to emphasize the importance of the moment, a gesture directed at me and the audience. Its grandeur was laced with an unmistakable artificiality. In that instant, I felt an overwhelming sense of confusion and disbelief. She continued, even adding tears that seemed forced, a product of her self-imposed emotion. The audience, recognizing the famous Professor Anderson, erupted into applause, and I felt something heavy and indescribable building inside me. It wasn't just coldness, it was immense disappointment, buried within me for years. Her words weren't born of pride but of a desire for recognition, a claim over what she saw as her own, not my, success. I couldn't remain silent anymore. My hand firmly but gently reclaimed the microphone, ignoring her bewildered and indignant expression. "Thank you, Mom," I said calmly, though a storm raged within me. "Please, step back for a moment." All eyes were on me. I paused, gathering myself before continuing. My voice was steadier than ever. "Yes, I am the daughter of the renowned Professors Anderson. And yes, I stand here before you, but not because of that name. I am here not thanks to them, but in spite of them." I caught my mother's gaze. Her face had gone pale, her eyes filled with confusion and pain. In that moment, I sensed the audience might also feel the weight of the truth I was about to share. I pressed on, watching every flicker of her expression. She couldn't understand that I was speaking a truth long overdue. I remember years when my own parents were ashamed of me, when I hid my identity, working as a cashier, because I didn't want people to know who I really was. I avoided school events because I wasn't accepted. And you know what? I won't hide it anymore. I won't let it overshadow my success. I looked at David, his eyes brimming with pride and support. His parents beamed with joy. There they were, my real family. The people who believed in me when others didn't, who invested their faith in me and helped me grow. I felt immense gratitude. I stand here not because of my name, not because of wealth or status. I stand here because of those who saw my potential, who supported me. I want you all to understand that success isn't measured by a name but by what you create, by who you become. I gestured for David to join me. As he walked onto the stage, I noticed my father and Sarah, unable to endure the gravity of the moment, leave the hall. I couldn't help but notice them briefly clutch each other, avoiding my gaze, as if they couldn't bear what had just transpired. And then the moment came. Holding that plaque, that award for innovation, I felt I had finally achieved something meaningful. It wasn't just a recognition of my work but proof that when you believe in someone, when you support them, it changes everything. This award was a testament to how kindness, support, and faith in another person can truly change the world. I turned to my mother, who still stood beside me, stunned and speechless. Her eyes were filled with blank incomprehension, but I couldn't and wouldn't do anything for her anymore. "I'm sorry, but I can't accept your sudden pride in me," I said, breaking the silence. "You lost the right to be proud of me years ago. My real family is here, on this stage." The hall erupted in applause. People stood, their applause resounding like a gentle affirmation. I heard whispers of admiration, voices supporting me and David. I looked at his parents, tears of joy in their eyes, and I knew I hadn't been wrong. My life, my truth, it wasn't a mistake. And though rumors about my actions swirled in academic circles, I felt no guilt. Even if it complicated life for my parents and Sarah, I knew I had done the right thing. This was my path, and I walked it without looking back.